last time that Senator Osmek and I were on the air together, it was we were actually kind of replaying the last day of Woodstock. I think out in his district. we were at a little fair out there. Was it the county fair?
No, it was some kind of an organic fest.
That was what it was. It was an organic festival.
Yeah.
And it was very organic because the rain was organic, the mud was organic.
Oh yes.
And there was lots of both.
Oh yeah.
That particular day, it was really actually, at the time we're going, wow, this is the rain pretty much kept people away. And but we had fun in droves. kept them away in droves. We couldn't hold them in.
That was when I was a lowly city council member, but now I've graduated to the new world of the state senate, which is a very different, scary place.
It is a different, scary place, but also somewhat of an amusing place. You were about ready to tell me right before we went on the air. You were about ready to regale me with tales of the 17-hour session that unfortunately resulted in the bill that sort of forces unionization on daycare workers. We'll talk a little bit about that. We mentioned it briefly in the last hour, but tell us a little bit about this 17-hour special. Well, it wasn't a special session, I don't believe, but it was a 17-hour session that resulted in this bill.
It was the regular, and this is we had decided that we were going to be very vocal. This is a new Senate. This isn't your grandmama's state Senate. This is a far different Senate, and we had a 17-hour debate on the on the daycare unionization bill. And I had a little theme music for you so you understand what it felt like to be stuck on the floor for 17 hours. This is what it sounded like. Now, for those of you who are old like us, we know what this music is. This is Yakety Sax.
Yakety Sax, and it was the closing theme from the Benny Hill Show.
Right, well, they're all chasing everybody around, and they're all trying, there's guys chasing girls, girls chasing guys. They're all over the place. That's what it felt like. It was I hate to say it was as new. So my story on this one, and for only a freshman, I got some really good stories so far, and some of them I can actually tell you like this one. So we were going through this debate, and we decided we were going to go the whole 9 yards. And at about 4 o'clock in the morning, it turned into freshman time. And it was myself, Mary Kiffmeyer, who is a freshman senator, but has previously been elected, and a few of the others, and they had the freshmen running the show. So we were introducing amendments on the floor, and before I had to do mine, I went to the back room, and the lights were turned down low. It's a retiring room where only senators are allowed. The lights were turned all the way down, the music was off, and every chair was occupied by somebody. Sleeping, lounging, doing something. It looked like a frat house. So your state senate in their retiring room looked like a big mosh pit frat house type of situation, and I thought that was just hysterical that we were having to go through these type of contortions to try and stop something as onerous as that daycare bill.
Did they bring out the kegs? I mean, were they tapping kegs out there?
Well, not that we're aware of. However, remember, the majority members, they actually have their offices in the Capitol.
Right.
They kept on going back and forth to their offices. Now, we don't know what was in those offices, but once upon a time, people got into trouble for how much energy.
I remember this, yes. I remember when this happened. This wasn't that long ago, was it? It was like 2 or 3 years ago?
I think it was more like 4 or 5, but
4 or 5 years ago, yeah.
Somebody went in there, I think it was Channel 9, and they went into all the offices, and all the lobbyists had just lined up bottles, and it was basically open bar. So, those type of things do happen at the Capitol. I wish I had better stories, but that was a good one to start with.
Open bar, politicians, lobbyists. Yeah, that's a formula for success right there, isn't it?
Well, I tell you what, it probably would have made the thing a little bit more entertaining. Although we enjoyed every 17 hours, every minute of 17 hours, because we were doing the right thing. We were also showing the majority party and the governor, we're not just going to lay by our dish quietly. We're going to make sure that people understand what's happening in the state, which leads me to the property tax reform that we got into in the session. Everybody thought, the majority and the governor, they're all running around saying, property tax reform. You know what happened? You know what's happening? You ain't getting it. It's not happening.
So, why isn't it happening? Because property tax reform was actually a fairly broad, or at least broadly popular. Both parties were talking about property tax reform. Obviously, each party's going to have a little bit different take on how to do that, but you would think that there'd be it would actually go through under those circumstances.
Well, you would think so. Now, here's the first flaw in their argument. This is the first flaw. Property taxes are a local jurisdiction issue. They are not a statewide issue, unless we're putting caps on them, unless we're sending them money. Now, there's the rub here, is that suddenly the DFL and the majority decided that they were going to chuck in $800 million. Oh, sorry, I think that's the right number. It sounds big, but it's 800, out of $2.1 billion in tax increases, they decided to put more money into LGA.
Well, local government aid, for those of you who don't know what LGA is.
Right. So, what happened is this was on the premise that people, the local jurisdictions, because they got all this money from the state, they were going to reduce their property taxes. Well, what's happening? Now we're starting to see this. In Minneapolis, R.T. Ryback, God bless him, he gave his people a 1% reduction in his levy. That's the current projection on his budget he just prepared. Well, that equates to about $2 million, $2.3 million, except that they got $11.9 million. So when you get $12 million and you only give back $2 million, you got $10 million in new spending. So they should have given back more like $6 million, according to the tax incidence study, which was what we sort of base some of our assumptions on. The tax incidence study said give 50 cents in tax reduction for every dollar in new spending. That doesn't include the fact that they got $5 million in sales tax. Remember, we put in a sales tax exemption for locals?
Yes, we did.
So, add it up here. Follow the money, as I think it was Coleman. You get $17 million, but only give $2 million back to the taxpayers.
When we come back, we're going to talk more about LGA and what that does to the actual local governments. I'm Ed Morrissey from HotHair.com, live at the Minnesota State Fair from the AM 1280 The Patriot booth. Keep us tuned in. We're HotAir.com, live at the State Fair, north end of the fairgrounds. We're having a great time out here. It's a little warm. It's a little toasty out here. It's going to get a lot warmer, but we are having a great time here in the morning. We're talking with State Senator Dave Osmek, who is one of the Taxpayers League's best friends. I see that you've been designated that for this year.
Yep, I had a 100% perfect score with the Taxpayers League. I did not vote the way that some of my friends in the Nurses Association or the DFL might have liked me to vote for, but I voted the same way I voted since I was the city councilman in 2001, and I took that, and that's one of the things that I went to St. Paul is, I said, the first thing I'm going to do when I walk through those granite pillars is remember the taxpayer first, and I think that's a lot of, some people need to think about that.
Well, we're talking about LGA here, we're talking about local government aid, which is basically a redistribution system to make sure that some of the less fortunate communities have enough money to run their local governments. That was originally intended to basically redistribute out to the outstate areas mainly to make sure that, as we were saying in the break, as you were saying in the break, they didn't turn into dust bowls because of a lack of infrastructure.
Right. It was a good idea, and it's still a good idea. Some cities need this kind of help in western Minnesota or northern Minnesota, particularly maybe even on the Iron Range, where we could actually put in a sulfide mine that would actually make millions and millions of dollars worth of tax revenue and give us 1,000 jobs. But let's not go off in a different direction. But it is a good idea on principle. However, it has been, let's say...
there's a lot of things that are good ideas in principle, Dave.
Well, yeah, the Great Society under Lyndon Johnson was a great idea, right? Until we realized that it's just not working the way we thought it would.
Well, it's built, and again, this is getting a little far afield, but it's the same issue. It's built on a very poor foundation. It doesn't pay for itself, which means that you're constantly borrowing money from the future in order to pay for benefits now. And so what's happening with LGA in the state, because obviously Minnesota can't print its own money, you can't really do that. So what's happening?
They like to try.
They like to try that. LGA originally, the idea was to get the money spread out, but what it's really doing is it's mostly coming back in, right?
Right. And now let's talk about St. Paul. We are in the fair. Well, we're in Falcon Heights or something, but we're very close to St. Paul. And St. Paul is, we talked about Minneapolis in the last segment, but let's talk about St. Paul. St. Paul got a $10 million levy LGA increase, $10 million, and I have asked them for how much money they're saving because they're going to not have to pay sales taxes on police cruisers and durable pieces of equipment and paper clips and pencils. So that's a good thing. I think that was the right thing. We shouldn't be creating a backdoor tax through the locals to fund state government. But we don't see any reduction in St. Paul. St. Paul, according to Chris Coleman and his budget he just proposed, has no property tax levy reduction. That means we're giving them $10 million plus probably $2 or $3 or $4 million worth of state sales tax reductions, and the poor property tax payers are getting nothing.
That's reform.
mean, and we haven't talked about Duluth, and I don't have their numbers right now, but basically a third of all money we spend on local government aid goes to Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Duluth. That isn't how we set this system up. We deserve better than this. And frankly, the reason for local government aid, the premise of it, is because they don't have the base, an industrial base, a commercial base that is able to support their cities. Well, guess what? I think Minneapolis and St. Paul do have a base that can handle this, and they need to be held accountable, because what's going to happen with this money is they suddenly have plenty of money to spend on, what was it, $50,000 or $5 million water fountains, or I forget what the number is. But we deserve better than this, and this isn't property tax reduction. So when you listen to Governor Dayton and he says property tax reform, you ain't got it.
And I mean, this has been part of the problem with LGA all along, is that it's boosting areas which really should be able to sustain their own governments based on their own tax base. Like you said, the rural communities may have a real difficult time doing this, especially in down years where agriculture sags and that sort of thing. But these are the big industrial commercial centers of the state: Minneapolis, St. Paul, Duluth, for that matter. They should be net exporters of LGA, not net importers of LGA.
You would think so. And in my district in particular, I think there's only 3 jurisdictions that might have any kind of LGA. I mean, in my district is the western side of Hennepin County, also known as the Lake Minnetonka area, which is the ATM for Governor Dayton and the Democrats. It is. When you look at where the money comes from, is this big red blob. It's the darkest of the darkest of the dark in my district. So that's why I think my constituents are very happy to see that their senator came in with the best friend of the Taxpayers League Board.
And very obviously needed to come in that way.
Yes.
For that reason. All right, let's. We've got a couple more minutes left. Let's talk a little bit about rail. You've got some new numbers on North Star that I think are interesting.
Yep, I'm the local person that really has disagreed with light rail since the minute that Jesse Choo Choo started. And looking at the numbers, it's not necessarily always the build-out numbers. It's the second side of the story is the operating expenses. So when you're talking about North Star is the heavy rail that goes up to Becker, which they want to, for some reason, extend all the way up to Rice, Minnesota, which I've driven through. I drive through there going to my parents' cabin all the time. I'm trying to figure out who the hell's going to get on this train in Rice to go to Minneapolis unless they're going to the airport.
Right.
So what it's come down to is the numbers that I projected originally are actually coming true. When you throw in the actual cost of construction, because every private business has to pay for their durable overhead.
Yep.
So when you throw in, originally, just the subsidy is $20 a ride. Right now, $20 a ride in operating subsidies. You throw in the net cost of the bonds at 4% interest. We pay one way, $49, just about $50 one direction for one person to ride on there. The ridership doesn't sustain it. We pay $14 million a year in public subsidies to keep that thing running. The riders pay $2.5. This is a money pit of biblical proportions. It makes Southwest look cheap at $2 billion for 17 miles going out to Eden Prairie. It actually makes Southwest look efficient.
Wow. So one of the things that is coming up nationally, and I think we saw some newspaper stories about this last week, was the building plan, the urban plan from HUD, which is to centralize and try to force people back into the city centers so that you get rid of these supposedly get rid of transportation costs. You cut down an urban sprawl, which means suburbs. And rather than investing in things like roads and freeways, they want building plans that encourage people to just kind of live on top of each other in the cities. If that came true, would this still be a sinkhole?
It still would be. You'd still be in. They're going to add in Southwest. They're going to add in I think it's Bottineau line that goes up into the Maple Grove area along County Road. I think it's 81. They're going to keep on building these things because they think that this type of urban planning is going to make a difference. So we actually listened to them in the transportation committee talk about, and we got them to say on the record that this doesn't create, along those lines, it doesn't necessarily create economic activity organically. It takes economic activity from around the metropolitan area where normally, let's say,
Chili's is going to build a new place out in Burnsville or Lakeville. Instead of building it there, they build it closer to the light rail line. So there's no net increase in actually economic activity. It's just redistributing where it's going. So, and besides, we are not, and I think this is what the DFL needs to understand, and by the way, we should change the DFL from DFL to a different acronym, because really, the farmers aren't in the DFL anymore. We found that out at the Farm Fest Flim Flam that Dayton tried to pull over on them, and now he's changing his mind, is that they shouldn't, the F should be gone, because really they represent not farmers, but urban liberals. So the new acronym should be DULL. That is what they stand for. They don't stand for the farmer. And anybody who thinks that Governor Dayton didn't know what was in there, and if we have to, I guess we could create a department of read the bill to the governor, because he apparently didn't read it when the bill came in front of him at the end of the session. But anyway, we are not Minneapolis. We are not New York. We are not Chicago. We don't want to be New York or Chicago. We live here because we like to have a nice lot, and we like to have parks, and we like to have some space to move around. And that's how Minnesotans have always been, and unfortunately, the people that are in the DULL, that are within the metropolitan ring, are not thinking that way. They're thinking, let's turn ourselves into New York, because if we don't turn ourselves into New York, we're just a failure.
Senator Dave Osmek, representing the Mound area and all that. The Taxpayers League, 100% best friend. It's great having you in here, especially when it's not raining and muddy. And
well, now it's just hot.
Now it's just hot. Well, we're gonna come back here after this break. We'll take your calls at 651-289-4488. Talk a little bit more about the news of the day, and eventually get to the food out here at the State Fair. I'm Ed Morrissey from HotAir.com, live at the State Fair. Stay tuned.